we have done is we have created a picture of America during a certain period of time.
Today it is history, and it is a recollection of things as they were 40 years ago.
It was my job to explain, to show these conditions so that they could be alleviated, because here were people starving, needing clothes, and so forth. You do something about this.
We were a public agency paid for by the people of the United States. And we weren't in the business of, making pretty little pictures only about themselves. We were in the business of drawing the portrait of rural America as it was in that particular context at that particular time.
But you must also realize that the Farm Security Administration file was made as an epoch of American history. And the success of the file and the depth of feeling of the file was the result of history.
I think photographs that I did for Farm Security, and what we all did, I think, is an expression of our feeling that we were living in a great country, but that the country was in great trouble. And also that the people who were most troubled in those times were also the people who were part of its greatness.
I'm blowing down this road, dusty road. I'm a-blowing down this old dusty road. I'm a-blowing down this old dusty road, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated this way. I'm a-going where the water tastes like wine. I'm a-going where the water tastes like wine. I'm a-going where the water tastes like wine, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated this way. I'm a-going where the dust storms never blow. I'm a-going where them dust storms never blow. I'm a-going where them dust storms never blow, 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 and I ain't gonna be treated this way.
Between 1935 and 1942, a small group of photographers recorded the effects of the Great Depression on rural and small-town America for a government agency, first known as the Resettlement Administration, and later renamed the Farm Security Administration, or FSA. Under the leadership of Roy E. Stryker, chief of the FSA's historical section, everyday American life was documented by an ever-changing staff of photographers, which during various phases of the project included Walker Evans, Ben Shawn, Dorothea Lange, Arthur Rothstein, Carl Meidens, Russell Lee, John Vachon, Edwin Rosskam, Marion Post Wolcott, Jack Delano, and John Collier Jr. Traveling the length and breadth of the United States, the FSA photographers made hundreds of thousands of pictures, which they sent to Stryker in Washington, D.C., where their collective work was simply known as the File. Today, the FSA file of more than 70,000 photographs remains in the nation's capital, housed in the Library of Congress, and is the most complete photographic document of American life and culture ever made.
Yes, your $2 shoe hurts my feet, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated this way. I'm a-going down this old dusty road. I'm blowing down this old dusty road. I'm a-blowing down this old dusty road, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated this way.
In 1979, 6 of the original photographers for the FSA reunited in Amarillo, Texas, to discuss their work of 40 years ago with cultural historians F. Jack Hurley, Werner Severin, and Stephen Plattner. Over a period of 3 days, the photographers reminisced together, remembered the Great Depression and its effects, reconsidered their collective effort to capture the image of America in their photographs, and reaffirmed their belief in the ultimate value of the FSA's photographic file for America's present and future generations.
This was a period of really social unrest in the whole world, and as well as the United States, because we were in really a very sad way. So consequently, people were very, very much concerned of what was going to happen to the country. So there you are. These were the basic things of the times. There was much talk, what to do. Should we, let's see, in 1931, Hoover was the president. In 1932, Roosevelt was elected, and he took office in March 33. Okay, almost immediately, the banks were closed, and he started his administration with a very ringing speech, say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Later on, he became concerned with 1/3 of a nation, ill-fed, ill-clothed, and ill-housed. These were efforts to rouse the country in an effort to try to get the country back from really this deep depression where there was at least 25 to 30% unemployment.
There was nothing glamorous about the 30s, except one thing. It was a politically naive period. And all of us who went to Washington at that time had some crazy idea that what we could do could alter the course of history.
I really wish to, in my job with FSA, to effect social and political changes through visual means and to shock and arouse and inform the American public. Also to encourage efforts to effect social justice and to eradicate some of the inequalities.
I came to work for Farm Security because I was influenced by the photographs. I admired the photographers, but above all, because I was interested in people. I was interested what society and environment was doing to people, to human beings, and I was interested in what was happening for our country.
I wish to approach my experiences at FSA primarily as a background of education, and also as a background of education that might be open to any photographer who wants to follow through with his images. And I found myself working at FSA unknowingly laying down the foundations for the rest of my life.
I frequently traveled with the county agent. I found that by working with the county agent in the area, I would be accepted by the people in the area. They all knew the county agent. The county agent knew everybody in his county, and I found that there was a ready acceptance of that relationship. He would vouch for me, in other words. And somebody arriving on the scene in a car that had Washington, D.C., District of Columbia plates, you know, would not be suspicious. Also, I think that people in those days welcomed any intervention on the part of an interested, sympathetic person. And our usual approach was to explain that in taking these photographs, we would acquaint people in other parts of the country of the plight the problems that existed that had to be corrected.
I think we were sometimes looked upon suspiciously by authorities when we got into an area before they knew what we were doing. But I found almost universally an acceptance and an understanding on the part of the people that we were photographing of what we were trying to do. I remember, for example, in a relocation area where we had gone to record and document what was happening to people who were being moved out of a huge area where an artificial lake was going to be created by a dam that was being built, and this area was going to be flooded. And all these people were being moved out. Farm security was involved in finding new homes for them, new lands for them outside the area. Of course, they were all pretty resentful about having to give up their lands where they'd been born and move somewhere else on the basis of promises that things would be all right somewhere else. And their attitude was, no, we don't mind you take all the pictures you want. Tell everybody about it. Tell the whole world about it, what they're doing to us, what's happening here. Sure, go right ahead. That was the attitude.
Because I was supposed to go out to Iowa, photograph tenant farming. They said, well, it's going to take just 6 weeks to get out there. But in the meantime, Russ says, Roy, you better go out and read 4 or 5 books about tenant farming, Iowa farming in general. So I did that, then went forth out and went out to Iowa. So got out there and checked in with regional headquarters, finally county headquarters up in northwestern part of Iowa. And took a few pictures up there of tenant farming, mostly the outsides of buildings and which were run down and so forth, and then people, families standing in doorways, not too depressed really. But I'd found out also that in western Iowa there were some very severe problems among farmers who had not had crops for many years, that they were receiving outright resettlement grants in order to live on, to provide clothes and this kind of thing. This just seemed a little incomprehensible to me, because after all, I'd been raised in Illinois. And I knew that Iowa had fine land and so forth. Nevertheless, I went to this area and found some of the conditions down there. The picture of the hands, the hands of this homesteader woman was taken down there among the very first things, and the Christmas dinner, and then the Alfred Atkinson group of pictures, that family of probably 7 or 8 there, just really in rags in front of their home.
If one does have real empathy and concern for these people, that one has a more simple approach and one is much more sensitive and much more careful about one's approach. And in my case, I had also at times not had very much money to live on, and I knew what it was like. Not that kind of poverty, I'm not saying that, but I had seen many people with that kind of living in poverty, and my mother also sort of educated me a little bit, because she had been a field worker for Margaret Sanger, one of the first early field workers, and we discussed when I got this job the approach to people and how to find out about people and how to relate to them and get their cooperation, and she discussed this with me because she had to have that too. Once or twice I even met her in the field, and she gave me the names of people in the field. For instance, in West Virginia in the coalfield area, she gave me the name of one woman who had been a coal miner's wife who had been very helpful to her. And Mother would say, if you want to know, how poor they are, one little tiny visual thing is just look at the clothesline and what the clothes are like and how many there are and how many, and you can figure the whole family structure out from that. I also had a quick rapport with the children, who would immediately, as soon as the car stopped, rush down to the car, just like they do in any foreign country, you see. And I would make friends partly through the children and then through the women. And on occasion, I did actually try to do errands after I was accepted at all, and try to do things which were helpful and useful and saved the family, or the woman in particular, a lot of time, and just did things with her if she was fixing something or doing something, just so I could make her accept me and be more informal with her before I would start to photograph.
My first work in the Farm Security Administration was quite painful because Roy had the notion that the way to get fine photographs out of people was to take someone from Vermont and send them to the Rocky Mountains, as he did with Marion Wolcott. He tried the same scheme on me and sent me into the Mohawk Trail country and up the Erie Canal and through lower New England. I was very depressed. I did not turn on. And finally, actually dishonestly, I sneaked out to New Mexico, where I carried out my only really meaningful assignment for Roy, where I got back to my home country, where I had some distinct knowledge and motivation and historical background. My work in New Mexico was made around a fairly concise format of operation, which I think may have been followed out by a great many of the FSA assignments of other photographers. My first approach was to set up some kind of doorway within which I could move into the social situation of the county. As soon as I made contact with the field directors of this medical cooperative, I recognized that the project was primarily successful because of the Catholic Church. And I made contact with the parish priest in Penasco, New Mexico, which is a very mountainous area between Taos and Santa Fe. He in turn introduced me to a family because I felt that if I was going to make a significant document, I had to start from the inside out. I had to go into the heart of the Spanish American home culture in order to understand the problems of public health.
I felt that I had established a relationship between the effectiveness of photography and some direct action. Was a situation in Butler County, Missouri, where I found in traveling through that area that a number of tenant farmers had been evicted from their farms, and their belongings and all their worldly possessions were piled up along the side of the road. And nobody in Washington or anywhere else was aware of this situation. And I felt it was a disgraceful condition and that something should be done about it. So I took some photographs, sent them back to Washington, and also telephoned Roy Stryker and told him about this situation. And there was immediate action, intervention on the part of the government in Washington to do something about the plight of these people.
Roy was a tremendous politician and a fabulous promoter. Whatever else may be said of Roy, he is the father of this outfit. Without him, it would not have come into existence, and without him, it would have died early. I think that Roy knew how to work with photographers, certainly knew how to work with agencies and with the public, but didn't know too much about photography.
I don't know whether anybody has pointed out the amount of preparation that Roy expected you to have before going on any of these trips. It was sometimes overwhelming. It was never demanding, but it was always plentiful in its recommendations. Before going to New England, I had to read The Flowering of New England, and I had to read lots of other books, and I had to read practically the Declaration of Independence and the biographies of all the great New Englanders that came out. The same was true in every area that we went to. Roy was also very helpful in getting us connected with people in New England and other areas who would be able to help us make contacts and get on with our work.
The photographer takes a picture.
Mm-hmm.
This picture he keeps around until he has a sufficient number that is worth packing up and sending as a package. So then he sends them back. The mail, there was no air mail, so it came slow. Then it went into development, and it went into development pretty fast. I mean, didn't take long. Then it came out, and then it was sent back, then it was contact printed. And the contact prints were sent back to the photographer. Now, the photographer took the original pictures in Georgia. By the time they were sent back to him, he was in Wisconsin. And he, in most cases, hadn't the faintest idea what he took where by the time he got the captions to do.
Stryker came out there, he brought me a whole bunch of pictures. I had not seen anything for about 5 months. I'd been developing my negatives and captioning them, sending them into Washington. But I hadn't seen any prints. And I looked at the negatives with a magnifying glass to see that everything was sharp, and then I'd try to look at the expression on the people's faces. Were the eyes open, were they closed, or whatever. And that I get some idea. So I just kept working. Stryker said they were okay. But anyway, we traveled then, and I'd been up there and photographing in some of the lumber camps, and doing some of the nightlife in the lumber camp towns and so forth. And then we traveled. We just sort of eased around and just took our time. We just wander around the countryside. We go into a town, and he was a marvelous observer. You can go down the street at night, and he loved looking windows and comment about what's in this window here. What does it mean to this present time? The particular type of clothes. What were the tools and the hardware that were in the store were on display? What did they mean? And all these, you might call them minutiae, which are so really important in a particular lifestyle of a certain period.
One of the places that I concentrated on was Greene County in Georgia, which I visited twice for protracted periods of time. A sociologist happened to be working on a book about the county at that time, Arthur Raper, and many of the photographs that I did in that area were used in his book. One of my favorite ones is of a young black woman standing in the doorway of her house. I at that time was interested in the work of a group of photographers called Group F64 Group, which were very interested in long depth of focus in their pictures. And in this photograph, the young woman is standing in the doorway of her house. There is a long hallway, which is quite clear and sharp. And way at the end of it, you see other members of her family who are sitting there. It was also one of the photographs in which I experimented with lighting by placing flash bulbs on extensions hidden away in this hallway, so that you get a feeling of this long, long hallway, people there, and light coming in from the sides. I think that also that particular photograph might be an example of a farm security photograph, which is a document, historical record of a period, a sociological document valuable for researchers, historians, and also a work of art, because I composed it very carefully without violating any of the documentary value of the material that was in the photograph.
Documentary photography, it seems to me, is the kind of work that we did for the Farm Security Administration. It was the work that Reese did when he photographed in New York City in the slums. It's the work that Lewis Hine did when he photographed for the Survey Graphic and photographed the cotton mills in South Carolina. It goes back to the days of William Henry Jackson, when William Henry Jackson went out west.
Or probably more of an influence on my attitudes toward documentary photography and the kind of things that I was doing was seeing the work of painters such as Bruegel, Daumier, Van Gogh's drawings of the peasants, and a great deal of other art which had a certain attitude toward working people and toward the portrayal of people and human beings and their problems.
The photographer Paul Strand became a very important influence in my work. He was the only photographer that I had met at the time who had a social conscience. He was a man who was an artist, a supreme artist with a camera. Then later, of course, I came to Washington, and there were three very mature photographers artists, I would say. One of them was Ben Shawn, who was really more of a painter and a muralist and lithographer than a photographer, but who communicated a sense of being able to capture significant details to me. And Walker Evans, who was about 20 years older than I was, and who at that time had established his very severe compositional style of working with the camera on a big 8x10 camera on a tripod and producing these very austere and clean-cut compositions. And then, of course, I got to know Dorothea Lange, who was a very warm, emotional, sympathetic person who tried to capture feeling and mood and emotion in her photography.
Lots of folks back east, they say, is leaving home every day, beating the hot old dusty way to the California line. Across the desert sands they roll, getting out of that old dust bowl. They think they're going to a sugar bowl, but here's what they find. Now the police at the port of Increase say, you're number 14,000 for today. Oh, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, folks, you ain't got the do-re-mi, why, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee. California is a garden of Eden, a paradise to live in or see. But believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got the do-re-mi.
During the time that Roy Stryker was running the farm security files, and this is how so many of these problems arose, he would permit editors to come into the files. You have to remember these photographs were all government photographs. They were in the public domain. They were free and available for anyone to use in any way they saw fit, just as they are today in the Library of Congress. Anybody can get a print from those photographs and do whatever they want with them. And if they get into trouble, it's their fault, but they can still do it. And the same thing was true in the early days. And Roy Stryker would permit editors and researchers to come into those files, go through them, take out whatever they wanted, use them, and use them in any way they saw fit. And I think that the responsibility, therefore, is not that of the photographer, nor even the collection itself. It's the people who come in and use the collection of photographs.
My job was to know where things were, meet the more important users like Survey Graphic or whoever came around, and help them illustrate the stories that they would do. However, anybody could come in there and order pictures without my help or with it. And as it was government policy and government property, they had to be served.
I was in the Badlands of South Dakota, Pennington County to be exact, in the early spring of 1936. And I took photographs in the area, and while I was driving along the road in that area, I spotted a dried up creek bed known as an arroyo with cracked earth, and on it there was a skull. I got out there and set up my camera and took photographs from many different angles and waited for the sun to get low in the horizon so it would cast long shadows, and I put the skull over near a clump of cactus to create another effect, and I made about a dozen studies of this skull. Months later, in July, there was a serious drought throughout the Great Plains area. And a picture editor from the Associated Press was looking for material. He found this picture of the skull on the cracked earth and thought that this would be a wonderful symbol of the drought in the Great Plains area. So he sent it out over the syndicated wires of the Associated Press, and it appeared in hundreds of newspapers throughout the country. However, the editor of the Fargo Forum in Fargo, North Dakota, saw this and realized that it was a picture that could be taken at any time of the year, and he complained about it. Well, the next thing that happened, somebody went back to the files in the Farm Security Administration files and found that I had taken many other skull pictures. This thing began to blow up into an accusation of propaganda photography for the government, and I was accused of carrying this skull around with me and planting it in various locations. If the original caption that I had on the photograph, and the original caption that is still on that photograph, which is still in the Library of Congress files, if that original caption had gone out with a picture, nobody would have printed it, and nobody would have thought that it was a propaganda picture.
Since we brought up the question of Arthur's skull, I'd like to say that we really should distinguish and make it clear whether we're talking about a photograph being true or a photograph being manipulated.
Exactly.
Yes.
The photograph of the skull, what the camera saw with the skull in one place was just as true as what the camera saw with the skull in the other place.
Exactly.
Both photographs are true.
Exactly.
It's not a question of whether the camera is lying or not. The camera isn't. The camera simply records what is there. It's the manipulation, either by the photographer or by press agent or by the newspaper or by somebody else, which will make it true or untrue. I think that if the five of us were sent out by Roy Stryker on an assignment to cover the same subject matter, the same area, the same field, we would each come back with different photographs.
Yes.
Which photographs are true and which are untrue is not the question.
They'd all be true.
They'd all be true, exactly, but they'd all be different.
We'd have different interpretations.
Exactly.
There'd be different facets.
There would be different facets of the same basic truth. And I think that that's true of the whole file. The whole file, it tells a basic truth about what the country was like in that period.
I would like to differ slightly from Jack's view. I support completely that any number of observers sent out to the same spot come back with highly different material. This is particularly true if they're recording particularly human beings in human action and communication at a close proximity. Now, on the other hand, if you took all those photographs made at the same place, you'd find that there was a basic core similarity in all of them. The camera is a highly reliable eye. It's flat field, it doesn't discriminate, it records everything.
Documentary photography, it seems to me, is the kind of work that we did for the Farm Security Administration. However, once those photographs get published, printed, or broadcast, or seen on television, then it becomes, these photographs take on a different aspect. They now become part of the photojournalistic process, and different rules apply. And one of the most important rules is the one that you mentioned, the accuracy of the words that accompany the photographs.
You can give any sequence of photographs any meaning you want by what you put with it. The minute you have more than one photograph on a page, different photographs affect each other. If then, in addition to that, you write with it, you must realize that if photography is a language, so are words a language. I never used a photograph to tell something that words could tell better. And I never used words where a photograph would tell it better. We had been covering, with the migrants, the whole story of migration as it was going on in the United States at that time. And that was the period when the blacks began to leave the cotton fields and came to the cities. The farm security file contained very little material from urban areas and nothing really to speak of from the big cities. I convinced Roy that it was necessary, as he had covered the migration, it was necessary to cover Chicago, the urban scene, the black scene there, because the migration had gone into the city, as it now has even more. And that eventually led into 12 Million Black Voices. Well, the best known Negro writer at that time was Richard Wright. He had written one book that just shook the United States called Native Son. And he and Russell Lee and myself went into Chicago and lived in the Black Belt for 3 weeks. And out of that came hundreds of pictures, of which these are a few examples.
Better get down on your knees and let the good Lord hear your pleas. 'Cause if you want to rest at ease, moan you moaners. Just bend your head way down and pray to have the devil chased away. Come let your soul be saved today. Moan you moaners. Sing hallelujah, blood of the Lamb. Let your voices rise. Hear me talking to you, ain't no time to sham. If you want to get paradise, you must repent without a doubt. And let the good Lord hear your shout. Religion turns you inside out. Moan, you moan out.
As a latecomer to the FSA project, and since I hadn't experienced the excitement of the early Dust Bowl and the drama of the migrants and the California migrants and the Okies and the depths of the Depression, and also since the emphasis had somewhat already been changed on what needed to be filled in the files, my role was rather as a catalyst and to help get pictures into circulation. I discussed this with Stryker, with Ed Rosskam in detail, because he used to do a lot of the exhibits and talk to Stryker a great deal. And I was supposed to pick up loose ends, fill in holes, and also to emphasize the beauty and the fertility and the strength of our land, of the U.S.
I think I was the only one who really had a broad view of how that file changed from week to week, from month to month. In some cases, I actually wrote what some of the so-called shooting scripts. I looked at these, and the only one I can vouch for that I wrote entirely is the one to Marion Post on winter. Because I suddenly found that we had a file in which it never was winter. And she did a magnificent job.
At least some people wanted a more varied exhibit and wanted this contrast material and wanted to show that there was something else besides the rural poor in this particular situation. I think it also helped to, of course, get congressional appropriations and overcome and counteract opposition of the influential and wealthy landowners and the plantation owners and the members of the Farm Bureau. They were certainly not supporters. And all of these last were afraid of the long-term effects of the radicals, social, and as some called them, even communist programs.
I didn't feel that there were ever any constraints about the kind of things that I could photograph. But there were certainly pressures from time to time from different parts of the communities and authorities on the kind of things that I could or could not do. I remember in Greene County, for example, there was a strike at the cotton mill in Greene County when I was there, and I took photographs of the strikers and the pickets. We conversed with some of them, and we did notice a coolness on the part of some of the better folks in town toward us after that. Even though part of our coverage of what we were going to do there would be also covering, photographing those people as well, including the editor of the local newspaper, the sheriff, the judge, and so on and so forth. I think all of us take photographs and show some of the reactionary forces that were trying to suppress what we were doing. I think a lot of the pictures that we have of the South, we just mentioned black and white water fountains, drinking facilities, seating facilities, and so on and so forth. We're not exactly the kind of things that would be approved of, and not to mention so much of Dorothea Lange's work. They were done knowing that there would be criticism and there would be a hue and cry in Washington, and knowing also that Roy Stryker was going to face most of that, most of the burden of the problem.
I think we did try to photograph all aspects of rural life, the small towns, and we tried to help urban America understand rural America. I think that the scope of and the depth of the rural poverty and the human misery, the suffering and the exploitation and the loss of human dignity, as well as the property and material assets, was well portrayed. I think we were all, I don't know, maybe some more than others, were concerned and really eager to do something about it and to contribute to alleviating the pain and these inequities through visual means.
There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. We will beat 'em on the land, on the sea, and in the sky. There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, don't you see? There's a better world that's coming, don't you see? When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world that's coming, don't you see? There's a better world that's coming, don't you know, no. There's a better world that's coming, don't you know? I'm a union man in a union war, it's a union world I'm fighting for. There's a better world that's coming, don't you know? There's a better world that's coming, there's a better world that's coming, there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why, don't you see, and don't you know, no. Hey, there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why, there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. Better world that's coming, tell you why. Out of marching, out of battling, you can hear the chains are rattling. There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. Now there's a better world that's coming, and there's a better world that's coming, and there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, and don't you see? Better world that's coming, and tell you see. Better world that's coming, and don't you see?
What a photograph was to us then, and I'm not now talking about journalism alone, and what a photograph is today are two totally different animals. In the first place, every photograph has two lives. The immediate one and the historic one that follows later.
How are we going to understand what's happening to our society today unless we know something about our past? And here we have in Farm Security File a visual image of an important period of our own past. And we have it in the form that's available to people to study and to look at. It's a record of how the government and the people and of all walks of life were trying to solve a whole series of very, very serious problems. Maybe if we look at how they were trying to solve them and their successes and their failures, we can learn a little bit about how to cope with similar kinds of problems today.
And I think that they do have to be viewed today by the viewer, and he must be conscious of the fact that the content of the FSA photograph has changed in a way. It is not the same as it was when it was taken 40 years ago. Today it is history, and it is a recollection of things as they were 40 years ago.
What interests me is the fact that the historical significance of this whole photographic file can vary depending upon who is approaching it. You see, what we have done is we have created a picture of America during a certain period of time. Now, you can think of this as a great national treasure, which it is, which some people have said it is. Many people can approach this collection and from it draw many different things.
The file is a form of baseline against which you can measure a very complex pattern of change. The file does show, particularly with the concentration of all of us, the welfare and the enrichment of family, and the welfare and enrichment of American small towns that no longer exist under the urbanization of rural America. In other words, we have devastating evidence to measure the value of progress as studied in that file.
Because I think that this collection of photographs does have great historical significance, and that this significance will change. It will change from one period of history to another. If we're going through a period of inflation right now, for example, those photographs that show what prices were like in a store window, the photographs that Marion Post made, or that I made, or that Jack made, or any of us have made, showing the prices of objects in a store window, those pictures now become that much more interesting to us.
I couldn't help thinking about a project that I was involved in near Charleston, South Carolina, where the Army Corps of Engineers was building a dam for irrigation purposes that was going to improve the area there, and a large tract of land was going to be flooded and people had to be moved out. I was there for a long time. I photographed the relocation of the families. They moved everything with them, all the little trinkets that they had saved for years and all their family belongings. They moved the cemetery also. They were not going to leave the bones of their ancestors in that place. They took everything along with them. And there is a complete photographic record, I think quite subjective because I sympathize very much with these people, about what happened in that area. About a year and a half ago, I received a letter from a young anthropologist who was in South Carolina, who, digging through the farm security files, came across this collection of photographs. He got very excited about them. He made a selection of these photographs. He did a show. He put up an exhibit in Charleston using my photographs, some of Marion's that he found, some of Walker Evans that he found, and he made a traveling exhibit out of this. It was shown in the city of Charleston. It was shown all around the area. People from everywhere came around to see. They recognized their fathers in the photographs, their grandfathers, their families. The whole history of what had happened in that area was brought back to life. Now, the interesting thing to me was not only the response of the whole community to seeing part of their own past, but also the fact that this young man followed up on that. And he went around finding where these people were today. He went back to the areas that they had been moved to. He showed them the photographs. He interviewed them. He did a complete record of what their response was to where they were living now, what had happened during that period. And he was writing up these experiences. Some of the things that the people told him were very revealing about how they felt about the move, The whole thing was a reliving of history, a recreation of history, and of a very important part of their lives.
We're just beginning to realize that this was something that happened, perhaps by accident or by design, partly by design, but a good deal of it was a happy accident, and that it would be a great thing if we could do it periodically, if we could do it every 20 years. Or
the influence of other media, other visual media that have come up since our days, such as television and videotape and so on, in doing some of the kind of things that we were trying to do with still photography. I'm especially interested in the question of videotape, partly because it's become so easily manageable and so readily available and so on. Electronic media are beginning to offer all kinds of possibilities, which may be able to extend the vision of what we, with still photography, were trying to do.
In the terms in which we thought of it, photography was essentially the isolation of a rectangle at a particular moment in time out of amorphous reality. As they were entirely undoctored pictures, that's all it could be. And the rest was up to the photographer. His individuality was an individuality of selection.
The photograph is a two-way communication in the first place. In other words, the photographic mirror has two sides to it. And on one side, you got the communication from out there. And on the other side, you get the communication from in here. And then montage in the emotion. And both become embedded in the negative.
the photographs that we look at today that have great interest for us are a reflection of our own experience and our own sense of history. But who knows what 20 years from now, somebody digging into that collection of photographs is going to discover that may be extremely revealing, extremely important to that future viewer of all of these photographs.
In the 40s, in 41, we were already, as I mentioned yesterday, involved in thinking about the war effort and defense effort and so on, and many people were being relocated to make room for expansion of army camps and for building new army camps, training areas. One of these places was a place called Pine Camp in Upper New York State that I went to. And Farm Security was helping to get these people new homes, get them out of the area that the Army was going to need for a firing range and for training purposes. Somewhere in the FSA files, there is a photograph, which is no great shakes as a work of art. It's simply a photograph of a blackboard in an abandoned schoolhouse on which, in a childish hand, somebody had scrawled these words. It says, I have swept and put things the way they used to be. I hope the government does not destroy the old building. It has been a good school to everyone around here that I know of, and everyone seems to like it here. They took the seats, drawers, and other articles away, but it is the same old schoolhouse that we went to. We are all moving away now. I will miss some of our neighbors. Maybe it will do the government more good than it did to us. Well, I am going now and shall never be back around this part again. I live in South Rothen. My name is Mabel Simpson, Watertown, New York, RFD1. That is a photograph which is in the FSA files, and it seems to me that it's an important historical document. It tells a great deal about what happened in that area, and it tells that in simple terms that are valuable for historians from now until I don't know when.
I've sung this song, but I'll sing it again. of the place that I lived on, the wild windy plains in the month called April, county called Gray, and here's what all of the people there say. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. So long, it's been good to know you. This dusty old dust is a-getting my home, and I've got to be drifting along. A dust storm hit, and it hit like thunder. It dusted us over, and it covered us under. Blocked out the traffic and blocked out the sun. Straight for home all the people did run, singing so long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. This dusty old dust is a-getting my home. I've got to be drifting along. We talked of the end of the world, and then we'd sing a song and then sing it again. We'd sit for an hour and not say a word, and then these words would be heard. So long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. This dusty old dust is a-getting my home, and I've got to be drifting along. Sweethearts sat in the dark and sparked. They hugged and kissed in that dusty old dark. They sighed and cried, hugged and kissed. Instead of marriage they talked like this. Honey, so long, been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. This dusty old dust is a-getting our home, and I've got to be drifting along. Now the telephone rang and it jumped off the wall. That was the preacher a-making his call. He said, kind friend, this may be the end, and you've got your last chance at salvation of sin. The churches was jammed and the churches was packed, and that dusty old dust storm blowed so black. Preacher could not read a word of his text, and he folded his specs and he took up collection, said so long, been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. So long, it's been good to know ye. This dusty old dust is a-getting my home, and I've got to be drifting along.